November 14, 2010. A special group from Mount Vernon, Ohio, broke into the home of 32-year-old Matthew Hoffman. They didn't know what to expect, so they threw a flash grenade to stun and disorientate the man. Matthew, unsuspecting, was sleeping peacefully on the couch. He woke up from a sharp blow. One of the policemen pulled him to the floor. The man asked in bewilderment, "What is going on?" To which Detective Craig Finney replied, "You tell us," and handcuffed him. When inspecting Matthew's house, the police found a 13-year-old girl with her hands and feet tied. She was lying on a huge pile of leaves, covered with a blanket. Leaves were also in other rooms. The officers thought it was very strange. Who was this girl? How did she end up at Matthew's house? And what terrible crimes was he suspected of? Let's figure it out. Matthew Hoffman was born November 1, 1980. Almost nothing is known about his childhood. Perhaps some traumatic events happened to him that turned the guy into a psychopath. In 2008, he settled in a small house in the city of Mount Vernon, and led an isolated life. Hoffman did not have a permanent job. He lived on welfare from the state. Sometimes he worked as a tree pruner. Neighbors called him strange, which was expressed in unusual, erratic behavior. Matthew spent a lot of time in the trees. He could sit on the branches for hours. He sometimes killed squirrels and other small animals to feed himself. He cooked them on a fire, which he bred in the yard of his own house. According to some reports, Matthew was dating a girl who had a child. For some time she lived in his house. But on October 24, 2010, she hurriedly left with the child and things. As it turned out, the guy periodically beat the girl. But that day, in a rage, he attacked her and began to choke her. The girl wrote a statement to the police, but the guy was never punished. As it turned out later, before moving to Mount Vernon, Matthew lived in Colorado. There he committed several crimes: theft, burglary and arson of an apartment complex. For this, Hoffman was sentenced to 8 years in prison. After his release, Matthew did not change his lifestyle. He continued to steal. Sometimes it was petty shoplifting, but sometimes he broke into houses and took valuables to sell them. For the next robbery, Matthew chose the house of Tina Herman, a 32-year-old divorced woman who lived with 2 children, 11-year-old Cody and 13-year-old Sarah. Across the road from the house was a small forest plantation. It was there that Matthew hid on November 9th to follow the tenants of the house. He spent the whole night in a sleeping bag. In the morning, Tina drove the children to school, after which she had to go to work. As soon as the car drove away from the house, Matthew began to act. He entered the house through the ajar garage door and went in search of valuables. The man stayed in the house for about 1 hour, when he suddenly heard the sound of the front door opening and women's voices. It was the mistress of the house, Tina, and her friend Stephanie Sprang. Later, during interrogation, Matthew said that he felt trapped when the women entered the house. He did not want to harm anyone, but for some reason he had a knife and a bat. Hoffman hid in the bedroom, where Tina soon entered. He pounced on her, threw her on the bed and hit her head with a bat to knock her out. But to his surprise, the woman remained conscious and continued to resist. Hearing the noise, Stephanie ran into the bedroom and started yelling at the man. At that moment, Matthew drew a knife and stabbed Tina, which was lying on the bed. Stephanie ran out of the room to call for help, but the man caught up with her and stabbed her several times in the chest. Matthew was in a state of shock. He knew both women were dead and didn't know what to do about it. He was walking around the house, trying to make some decision, and suddenly he noticed a dog that barked a lot. The man was afraid that she would attract the attention of neighbors, so he dealt with her without hesitation. Matthew decided to dismember the bodies and dump them in the nearest pond, and burn the house with all the evidence. But he did not have time to carry out his plan. The children returned home from school. Seeing an unfamiliar man with a bloody knife in his hand, Sarah ran to her room, and Cody froze in horror near the door. Matthew stabbed the boy several times and ran after the girl. The man thought that she was already calling the police, but Sarah huddled in the corner of her room. Matthew didn't know what to do. As he later said in court, "I couldn't bring myself to kill her." The man tied the girl with a cord from a fan, covered her mouth with a gag, blindfolded her and went to the bathroom, where he began to dismember the bodies. But suddenly the man remembered that he had nowhere to hide the remains in order to take them out without attracting the attention of others. Then Matthew went to the nearest Walmart store, where he bought large black garbage bags, a tarp and gloves. After finishing the dirty work, Hoffman loaded bags of body parts into Tina's pickup truck, put the girl in the back seat, and headed to his house. There, he first carried Sarah to the basement, laid her on a bed of leaves, tightly bound her hands and feet with rope and tape. After that, he took special equipment for climbing trees and went to the Kokosing Nature Park. He came up with a new plan. He often visited the park, so he was well versed in its territory. He knew that there were old hollow trees. In one of them, a man hid bags with bodies. Matthew left Tina's car in the Kenyon College parking lot. After that, he planned to get rid of her. The next day, Matthew decided to return to the crime scene to clean up the evidence. He wanted to set fire to Tina's house. In order not to draw attention to himself, the man went on a bike. Approaching the house, he saw the police and froze for just a few seconds. At that moment, Matthew saw that one of the policemen had noticed him. He immediately pedaled the bicycle and rode on. The thought was spinning in his head: how the police found out about the incident so quickly. It turned out that Tina's boss sounded the alarm. She didn't show up for work and didn't return calls. This alarmed the man, because the woman always warned if she could not go to work. The boss went to Tina's house, saw a terrible picture and immediately called the police. Matthew realized that he needed to quickly get rid of the car, because there was a lot of evidence in it. Late in the evening he drove to the college parking lot and sat by the car for a while. The man waited for the right moment to leave unnoticed. But the plan fell through. He was approached by the police, who identified Tina's missing car. They began to question the man about who he was and what he was doing here. Matthew replied that he had nothing to do with the car. He is waiting for his girlfriend, who works at a hotel that was located next to the college. The police released him. The investigation continued. A search of Tina's house turned up a Walmart bag containing a tarp and a pack of large trash bags. Several police officers went to the nearest Walmart and requested video recordings from surveillance cameras. Looking through the records, one of the police officers recognized the buyer as the same guy who was sitting in the parking lot next to Tina's car. The police quickly managed to identify the perpetrator. Just 4 days later, on November 14th, in the early morning, a special group broke into the house of Matthew Hoffman. While the sleepy man tried to understand what was going on, the police searched the house. They were dismayed by what they saw. There were large mountains of leaves in every room. They were even in the freezer, where there were 2 fruit ice cream and 2 dead squirrels without skin. In some rooms all the walls were hung with bags of leaves. It was also strange that only 2 trees grew in the yard of Matthew's house, and the neighbors said that they had never seen Matthew raking fallen leaves. This meant that he was bringing them home from somewhere. During the search, the police did not know what to expect. They could only guess how many victims were on the account of Matthew. They checked every pile of leaves for fear of finding corpses in them. When they reached the basement, the investigators found a door barricaded by a wardrobe. When they opened it, they found Sarah bound, lying on a makeshift leaf bed. She was wearing a plastic bag that acted as a diaper. The mouth was closed with a gag. When Sarah was released, she complained that Matthew cut her finger. She also suspected that he had done something to her dog. The girl didn't know that her mother and brother were no longer alive. Matthew was arrested. For a long time he didn't confess where he hid the bodies, trying to confuse the investigation. But in the end, he showed the same hollow tree in the park. On January 6, 2011, Matthew pleaded guilty to all 10 charges, including 3 murders and rape of a minor girl. He received a life sentence without parole. Yes, he admitted to abusing Sarah. At the same time, He said that he didn't wish her harm and entertained her as best he could. He watched movies with her, let her play on the console. The man said that he was not going to keep Sarah for a long time, and even promised that he would let her go before Christmas. After her release, the girl was taken by her father. Psychiatrists said that Matthew clearly has a mental disorder, but they have not yet encountered such a thing. Detective Finney, who has been working on this terrible case for a long time, believes that the leaves may not have been the guy's addiction at all. Knowing his love for arson, the detective suggested that the perpetrator was planning to burn down the house and the leaves could help him a lot.